welcome to another info-packed episode of Garden Angels. This week I'll be looking at sprucing up a front garden on a budget.
Have you seen what's happening in the veggie patch?
No, what?
Something's eating their way through the leafy greens.
Oh, apart from Jody. No.
Did you do that?
No.
Oh, we've got bugs, so I'm going to sort that out.
And while you get stuck into that, I'm going to tempt you to get some perennials in the ground with one of the most spectacular borders you'll ever see. So get ready to get inspired. This is Garden Angels.
We love most about Port Douglas is its natural beauty, the beaches and the mountains, the she oaks and the pandanus. But when the developers rolled in, they transformed this place with resorts and villas, which we love to stay at. But you know what? They also bought one tree, and it gave this place a real sense of the tropics. Of course, I'm talking about palm trees. There are over 2,500 different species of palms, and here in Port Douglas, you'll find the most interesting ones. From my vantage point here, I'm going to do a bit of palm spotting. The really tall palms, the Fiji and Fan Palm, it's very graceful, but probably too big for the average backyard. The smaller palm down there, it's the Artotus palm, and it really takes lots of cold temperature. In fact, I've seen it covered in snow, so it's a great one for the mountains. That one over there with the swollen trunk, it's the royal palm, and the other one with the lovely green stem, it's the Alexander palm. This is really as good as it gets. Look at those red stems. It's called the sealing wax palm or the lipstick palm. I reckon it should be called the palm of envy because you know what? It just won't grow under 20 degrees Celsius. So if you live in the tropics, this is the palm for you. But if you're like me, we can just look at them and weep. You're not going to be able to miss this one because of its striking colour. It's called Bismarckia and it comes from Madagascar. It's actually endangered there, but it's certainly not here. Everyone's got them. This palm is great in pots, nice big tub and a good thick layer of mulch to keep it nice and moist. And this is really one of the only palms you can grow right across Australia. Now this is a pretty handsome looking palm. It's got pleated fronds. It's called the Vanuatu Fan Palm and it's absolutely magnificent. That one's about 5 years old, this one's about a year old and really only grows in tropical climates. But if you live in a cold area, you could easily grow it inside. Now, palms are really easy to propagate from seed. All you need is to collect them. They'll just fall on the ground, but they do have an outer husk that needs to be rubbed off or scarified. So that one's no good. It's discoloured and it's rotten, so we won't bother with that one. But try a nice, healthy-looking seed like that. Take the husk off and drop it into some water because they really do need soaking for 24 hours. Now, the ones that sit at the bottom, they're the ones we want. The ones that float to the surface, they're unviable, so don't bother even planting them. Fish them out and then pot them up. Now, I've got a really good potting mix here that's great for palms. There's a little bit of, have a look at that, bit of peanut shell in there and lots of coconut fibre as well, and it means that the drainage is really good. So you don't want them sitting around in wet soil. Fill up your little tubes. So the trick here is that you don't want to plant the seed too deep. The rule is you just press it down double the width of the seed. So really it only needs to go in about 1 centimetre and then just covered with a little bit of soil on top. Just finish off with giving them a little drink, of course, and in 30 days' time they will have germinated and sprouted up. And then you've got all these new little plants that you can pop in the garden, or the kids can sell them at the local fete.
impressions really last when it comes to the front yard. I mean, this is the first thing visitors are going to see as they walk into your house. This is a really tired space and in desperate need of a bit of a spruce up, and what better time to do it than just before the silly season. Well, this is a pretty big day's work, so I've got some friends in to help. They're going to start by getting the liriope out that's along this bed. It's very yellow, it's dying off, and it really is too high for the front of this bed. While they're doing that, I'm going to get stuck into pruning these moreas. They really haven't been done before. I'm not using the old hedging shears. I've moved up in the world. I've got my actual whipper snipper, and I've just bought a hedging head, which makes the job a whole lot easier. Well, this lovely old bird bath isn't the feature it once was, so I've got a spectacular maple to put in its place. The only thing is getting it out of here, and I'm strong, but I'm not stupid. Boys, thank you. Oh, now when Flemings pick trees from all around the world to give to us here in Australia, they really do it well. Look at this beautiful maple. It's a weeping maple and it's called Shojo Cedar. Now, it's a spectacular small tree for a perfect little courtyard like we have here. Needs to be in a protected spot and it likes reliably moist soil. But look at this beautiful feathery foliage and, of course, this really deep burgundy. It's just spectacular. It's going to be so much better than that ugly old bird bath. Now this family's quite busy, so I've chosen very drought-hardy yet colourful plants. Most of the plants we're putting in here flower prolifically through spring and summer, and this is no exception. The beautiful Scavola mauve clusters, commonly known as a fan flower. It is an Australian native, which we should be proud of. It's a beautiful plant, perfect for putting at the front of the garden beds, and that's what I'm doing here. This morea is looking a little bit tired, so I'm going to add a little bit of colour underneath that, and this will sprawl to form a really nice carpet, and it has masses of beautiful, tiny purple flowers. Now, another beautiful and drought-hardy perennial is Lomonium Parezio. You probably know it as Status. They're lovely purple and white. They've got a white centre and they're really prolific with flowering. Lots and lots of flower and this really interesting leaf. Now, these are a little bit red because of the cold, but usually you would see that's a really lovely lime green foliage. They will spread and you can divide them up and put them elsewhere in the garden when they get a bit older.
Now, unlike annuals, which complete their cycle and die within 1 year, perennials hang around for more than 2 years and they put on a spectacular display. Now, I'm at Cloud Hill, which is famous for its perennial borders. Now, granted, they're not at their peak right now. That comes later in summer and autumn, but there are still some spectacular plants around that hint at what's to come. Now this is one eye-catching, hot-looking plant. It's called Artotus Flame. Now, as the name suggests, it has these hot-coloured daisies from autumn right through to late spring, so it really fills that dull gap in the garden. It's a great one for the front of the border, only gets to about, say, 20 to 30 centimetres tall and maybe a metre wide. Comes from South Africa and it's a really tough, attractive plant. A really good one to mix with other hot-coloured plants in the perennial border. Speaking of brightly coloured plants, this one's a real beauty. It's a geum called Mrs. Bradshaw. Now, Mrs. B, as she's affectionately called, is a tough little plant. It likes full sun or it will do okay in light shade. But one thing that I really love about it is one of those perennials that puts on a real show when it's in flower, but after it's finished, it quite subtly retreats into the background to allow other plants to complete the show. Now, Now I wanted to show you this plant because it is a little bit more unusual. Now it's called the horned violet. And it's one of those plants that's very showy, but it's also undemanding. Well worth growing. You don't see it around a lot. It actually looks a little bit like a common viola, but it's got a much wilder look about it. And it's great en masse at the front of a border, underneath your roses, or even to contrast with a wonderful maple like this. Now, of course, you don't get a magnificent perennial display without doing a little bit of maintenance. One of the best ways to rejuvenate your perennials, but also get free plants, is to divide them. Now, I'm just cutting this plant back to make the job a little bit easier. You'll find that it'll reshoot in no time. Now, this is actually an Achillea. It doesn't look like much now, but it's a variety called Coronation Gold, which has spectacular gold flowers through December and January. Now, when it comes to dividing your plants, you could definitely get about 8 or more plants out of this clump right here. Just remember that perennials are actually really fast growing. Once they're up and going, each of those stems would triple or quadruple in a year. So if I was only to divide it into 2 parts, I'd defeat the purpose and have to divide it again the next year. Now what I'm doing is I'm just digging a bit of a trench around the drip line of the plant. That's where most of those roots are. And you'll find that you'll be able to shove your shovel underneath and eventually lift that whole clump out. But just for these purposes, you'll find that most of the perennials you can actually divide by hand. The Achilleas are very simple to do that with. But if it had a much woodier root system, then you might need to get in there with, say, a handsaw or a sharp knife or even a shovel. So get stuck into dividing your perennials this spring to keep them in tip-top condition and get heaps more free plants to give away to your friends.
It was only 10 weeks ago where we planted out this veggie patch from scratch. I can't believe the progress. We've got flowers, we've got fruit, it's all going off. But you know what? When I think of flowers, I think of one thing, pollination. And you know what? We planted yellow and orange flowers to bring in the honeybees, but I've invited a special guest, the native stingless bee, to help with pollination. These guys are beauties and they coexist perfectly with honeybees. They come in these hives. Anyone can get them mail order. Let's see if they want to come and play. Remember, these guys don't have stings, so they're completely safe. Also, they're fantastic pollinators and they produce the most delicious honey. We do have some gate crashes into the garden. These aphids have encrusted the flowers of the bok choy. But who would blame them? Because this garden's completely going off. The snow peas are bursting out of their skins and the butter beans, look at that, ready to harvest tonight. This bed is absolutely fantastic. But what do we do about those insects? I've got hoverflies coming in. I've got a beautiful ladybird down here eating them. So I'm not fussed at all. I think it will look after itself. The leafy greens are luscious. Look at these mini cos, great for those Caesar salads. And remember we cut the heart out last week? Well, they're all re-hearting nicely. Something is nibbling them. It's a little bit of slug damage, so I've been out here at midnight picking the slugs off. Nothing really to report in terms of pests with the root and stems, and I think it's probably because of all the alliums, the onions and the leeks. I think they do a really good job of companion planting and really dissuading those pests. Nothing really to report apart from skiting about how wonderful the beetroot is. Look at it. Remember that lovely red glow beetroot? And we planted the golden beetroot as well, and it's ready to be thinned out. That's just too close together there for my liking, so I'm going to spend a bit of time thinning that out later. The potato patch is pumping, even starting to flower, and I hilled them up with as much soil as I could find. When I ran out of soil, I just used sugarcane mulch. Now remember, you've really got to watch out. The 28 spotted ladybird can devastate this crop overnight, so be careful about her. Now the Jerusalem artichokes, they're doing really well. The rhubarb, a little bit slow, but they'll get there. And over here with the fruiting veg, things are going crazy. I can see little pumpkins starting to form, cucumbers starting to spill over, and the tomatoes. The thing with tomatoes is they're wind pollinated, not bee pollinated. So just give them a little tap and that'll dislodge the pollen and do the pollination for you. Now remember last time we rigged up this little water system down here, and that's how we watered the water roots. But now we've got to feed the feeder roots, and I've got just the organic fertiliser. Comfrey is what I'm talking about. Comfrey's been used for centuries to feed plants. It's a medicinal herb, it's not for eating. All you need to do is harvest some of the older leaves, and what you need to do to make the liquid feed is just to soak them in water. Now, you need to soak them for about 3 weeks. It ends up being a putrid, smelly mess, but the smellier the better, I reckon. Here's some I prepared 3 weeks ago. Now, the thing with Comfrey is it really promotes great tasting fruit. I like to alternate the Comfrey fertiliser with the seaweed solution. The seaweed nourishes the plant and strengthens the cell walls, and then the Comfrey gets great tasting fruit. Still to come, Jody adds her finishing touches to the front garden makeover.
It's amazing the results you can achieve by using a high pressure cleaner around the house. We're starting off with the fence line, getting rid of all this discoloration, mould and even pollution stains, and then we're going to head over to the pavers. In front of our balcony, to add a little bit of colour, we've got a repetition of 3 pots. Now, they're quite modern and sleek. They're from the terra firma range. They're called Kennedy squares. I quite like the colour too. And in them, to contrast with that lightness of the pot, these beautiful foliage contrast plants called elders. They're actually a type of elder, but they're called sambucus. Now, this particular one is called Black Lace, and it's suitably named because this feathery, really dark foliage. Now, another thing I like about this plant, it has a soft pink umbel of flowers. So you can imagine that really soft pink with that dark foliage and the light pot. They're going to look beautiful. Well, this is the first of 3 loads of decomposed granite. It's a beautiful product. It's like a sandy, coarse grain, not quite a pebble, but it's not quite a cement either. You whack this down, compact it, and you can see here it's got a lighter dust through it. That's actually cement, so that once this is compacted, it's not going to stay all loose and mess up everything. Now, once you brought your decomposed granite in, mixed it with a bit of cement and watered the surface down, it's time to bring in the big guns. And here we've got a plate compactor that we've just hired. Now, this is a very heavy tool and it requires a little bit of elbow grease, but what it will do is make this surface hard so you're not walking all the decomposed granite into the house. This is another great Fleming's plant called Physocarpus diabolo, a very sinister name, but it's commonly known as 9-bark. This is a 3 metre by 3 metre shrub, believe it or not, but kept in troughs like this, obviously, you can keep it under control. And they're great for moving around the garden if you want to divide areas up. You can always put larger growing shrubs in and then keep them in the garden as a permanent hedge. Now, these are quite adaptable to most soils and they've got a wonderful bald white flower which contrasts really well with this dark black foliage. Well, it's amazing what a difference a few simple projects in the garden can do to a big space just like this. The hedges are finally pruned, which they were just dying to get done. They look a lot better. We've taken out the plants that didn't work in this garden bed and we've replaced them with a mixture of beautiful free-flowering perennials. Now, gone is the old bird bath and this spectacular maple is in its place, giving us loads of colour. We also got rid of the tired, dirty old gravel and put down this really nice, lighter coloured, decomposed granite surface. And the gurney or high-pressure water cleaner did wonders, just stripping away all that old soot and gloom off these pavers, and they're actually yellow underneath all that. And of course, bit of separation at the other end of the garden with our beautiful 9 barks in those stark white pots. I think the area looks great.
This is a really common scenario where you've got a great room like this bathroom, but it looks out onto a blank, ugly wall. Well, what do you do with it? I have got some garden art like you've never seen before that's going to transform this into a room with a view. Okay, so picture this. You come home from your favourite holiday destination and you've got lots of beautiful pictures. Now this is my favourite place on earth, Santorini. And can you imagine looking out onto a view like this 365 days of the year? Well, it's really simple. All you need to do is take your favourite digital photo into a print shop and they'll enlarge it onto a giant piece of waterproof vinyl that can be simply stuck on the wall. Our scene looks just magnificent, but it was missing one really important thing, and that of course is the plants. So what I've done is chosen plants from the Mediterranean region just to really bring this scene to life and make it more authentic. See, everywhere you go through the Mediterranean and Greece, you see beautiful geraniums and of course conifers. Now this geranium is a variety called Designer Dark Red. So it's really, really vibrant in its flowers. It blooms from spring right through to summer. It's a mounding variety, so it only gets to about 30 to 40 centimetres tall. And of course they're really tough, which means you don't need to water them much. Just deadhead those flowers to keep them looking good. Then what we've used at the end is a Spartan Juniper. It grows nice and narrow but also quite tall, so it will frame our scene beautifully. I'm really loving this effect, and I tell you what, from where I'm sitting, I can imagine that I'm right back there in Santorini. Now, I definitely think that this is taking garden art to a whole new level.
Sad as it may seem, that's all we've got this week, but next week we've got a jam-packed show yet again, full of info. Oh, and if you have missed any of tonight's show, you can always go and have a look on the website. There's lots of great fact sheets there. Next week, I'm showing you the succulents of succulents.
What's that?
It's the succulents of succulents.
The best succulent.
The succulent, of succulents.
Oh, I get it. And summer holidays are coming up, and if you're going away for the summer holidays, then I've got some great tips to keep your garden alive when you get back.
And I'm going to show you how your garden can become a medicine chest.
Ooh.
Yes, all those plants that can help you enhance your health and beauty.
Can it help my knee?
Yes. My back.
You guys are wrecks.
All this and more next week on Garden Angels.